Today is March 24th, 2016. I'm Adrienne Falaise, and it is my honor to be interviewing Mark Snow for the Archive of American Television, and we are here in Santa Monica, California.
We are rolling.
Okay, thanks so much for sitting down with us today, Mark.
Sure.
So we're just going to start with some background information.
Okay.
So what was your name at birth?
How'd you know about that? Oh, well. Anyway, it was Martin Fulterman, Fulterman. When my grandfather came over from Poland, and he was at Ellis Island, he forgot to cross the first T, so it looked like an L. So the original name was Futterman. And I was in a band touring all over the country. I never saw another Fulterman in any of the phone books of any cities we played in. So, how interesting is that? Really great. Okay.
So then how did you become Mark Snow?
Well, that's later on down the line. I went to High School of Music and Art where I was an oboe player. And after that, I got into Juilliard as an oboe player, and that's what it was looking like I was going to do. And there was this concert I played first oboe in. We played this Ravel piece called Tambo de Couperin, which is one of the hardest oboe solos in the literature. And I had practiced it for months and months. And it goes into a high register of the instrument that is like fake fingering. Anyway, to make this short, I screwed it up pretty bad. The conductor looks at me and makes a face, stops the orchestra and points at me. And you could hear him say, God, and then start up again. And I thought, this isn't all that much fun. So anyway, I had a roommate, his name is Michael Kamen, who was a film composer, fortunately no longer with us. We put a band together. What was the question again?
How you got the name Mark Snow?
Oh, right, okay, here we go. So, this band was called the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble. We played classical and rock and roll together. We played with many of the orchestras in America, including Leonard Bernstein and Boston Symphony and Hollywood Bowl, where there was an orchestra where we played. We did an arrangement of a Bach, Brandenburg Concerto. Okay, so, and we also toured all over the place, the college circuit and the Fillmore East and West, and these big venues right in the heart of the late 60s, So anyway, that lasted 5 years. After that, the guitar player and myself got a job as record producers in a very small outfit in New York City. After a year, that was kind of going nowhere. My wife, who had family, or has family, no, had family in LA, said, look, let's just go there, and people I know will introduce you around, and you can write music, for TV shows and movies. Oh, really? I know, how do you do that? You'll figure it out. Really? Okay. So, 2 kids, station wagon, $1,000, out we went. Get to her father's house up in Mandeville Canyon. Very nice. After 2 weeks, he couldn't stand it anymore. Here's another $1,000, go get a shack in Malibu. We get a shack in Malibu. These row houses, where the chart house is, or moon shadows, or whatever. Anyway, my brother-in-law, who was on The Rookies, an actor on The Rookies, got my demo tape to Aaron Spelling, and I don't think he ever heard it, but he said to my brother-in-law, oh, can he do this? Is he good? Yeah, he's good. All right, give him a chance, right? Just before I started working on it, I got a letter from the company that I had worked with in New York, this record company, who said, if you do any work in the next year or so, you owe us so-and-so commission. And basically, if you don't do that, there will be consequences. Now, I think the consequences went beyond anything, legal. It was more about, we'll send someone out there. So I said, oh no, now what? I go to a music lawyer. The music lawyer says, hey, it's easy, just change your name. And then when the contract is expired, go back to your original name. I said, great, okay. So then it was time to choose a name. So I knew when I saw the credits go by, at the end of these TV shows, that's where they showed who the composer was. And they went by fast. They weren't like, didn't hold on these things for seconds even. So I saw, if your name was, I don't know, Patricia von Brandenstein or something, you were, who? So I thought, Bip, that would be good. So Mark, short for Martin, maybe. And I really liked Phoebe Snow. Okay, so that's obvious. So that's how that happened. Then it was my first job was successful. And I thought, wait a minute, maybe I am this guy, this Mark Snow guy. Kept it, and the rest is history.
The rest is history.
That's it.
Well, let's back up a little bit and talk a little more about your childhood.
Yes.
When and where were you born?
Brooklyn, New York, 1946.
And what were your parents' names, and what did they do for a living?
My mother's name was Lee. My dad's name was Harry. She was a kindergarten teacher. Loved it. And the school was in walking distance of our apartment. She had to play the piano. That was a requirement then, to do the rhythmics classes, dun, 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 now everybody, And my dad was a drummer, and he played with the big bands of in the 40s, and he played on some Broadway shows in the pit. And then he decided that's it for me. I just want to be home. There's too much traveling, this, that, and the other thing. Okay, so that's the name of that tune. What was the rest of this?
Oh, no, that answered that.
Oh, okay.
Did you have any siblings?
No.
What traits do you think you inherited from your parents?
A good sense of humor, I think, really is probably the main one. I could have used a little extra, this, that, and the other thing, but after how many years of therapy, I think I finally am getting a handle on it. So the interesting thing about how I got into music in the first place was that I loved the Lucy show, I Love Lucy, right? But they wouldn't let me watch it because it was past my bedtime, really. And when was that? At 8 o'clock or something ridiculous like that? Okay. And they said, we'll let you watch it if you take piano lessons. No, really? Piano lessons? Oh, I hate the piano. Well, no Lucy. Lucy, piano. No Lucy, no piano. Okay. So that was that. And I started taking piano lessons and started to understand a little bit more about music. I kind of instinctively, maybe genetically, took up the drums as well. Not the serious, percussion, mallet instruments or timpani, but just drum set, And I was a pretty good rock and roll drummer. But I also thought, the schlepping around drums, that's not fun. How about a nice little instrument that fits in a case and you can just, all right, which one will that be? The flute? No, too boring. Clarinet? Everyone plays the clarinet. How about the oboe? The oboe, wow, that's really a little more interesting, perhaps. So started in with that and liked that. And found a teacher in New York who also taught at Juilliard and was very helpful when I did my audition for Juilliard. He was on the jury, or the people who, listened to the applicants. There was I was the first oboe player in the New York All City Orchestra, and we would play a concert every year at Lincoln Center, and there would inevitably be an oboe solo that, that, I played, and I did okay with that. And I'm thinking, New York City, high school, first oboe player, getting into Juilliard, no problem. Go up to Juilliard, and I'm in a hallway waiting my turn to go play my audition piece, which was just piano and piano accompaniment. And I'm meeting all these other people from all over the world, oboe players, and everyone's taking out their oboes and warming up, and I'm listening, and I'm thinking, you are kidding me. And I was completely, I thought, New York City, first oboe, has to be, I have to be the best. Not even close. So there must have been 20 of us, and I was probably maybe number 18 or something like that. You never knew what the ratings were, but I think I just kind of snuck in there. That was sort of the beginning of thinking, oh, I don't like this. I'm going to pick up my marbles and go play somewhere else. So, but I got in, and the experience of being there, it wasn't so much this school as it was what was going on in New York musically at the time, which was just fantastic. There were concerts every night, sometimes 2, 3, 4 concerts a night, everywhere, different, combinations, different orchestras, chamber music, avant-garde, baroque, classical, violin solo, piano recital, everything. The most, eclectic, plus all the pop stuff going on. It was, and I had moved out of Brooklyn to I had an apartment up on the Upper West Side, and with Michael Kamen, we were roommates, and so that time was like, it wasn't so much what I learned at Juilliard as much as what I just immersed myself in. If I heard a piece of Stravinsky or Ravel or Shostakovich or, whatever, Bach, something or other, Mozart, whatever, I made it my business to go to the library and find the score and say, how did he do that? That's amazing. And then I'd bring it home, I'd listen to the recording, and I'd watch the notes go by and say, wow, that's it. Well, that doesn't seem too hard, I guess. But no one had to tell me to do that. I would hear something and just be so taken by it. Like anyone's first time hearing some great music who's involved in music and wondering, wow, what does this look like on paper? And so that was a big deal for me.
So when did you do your first compositions?
For TV shows or anything?
Just ever. Was it Juilliard your first time scoring?
Yeah, it would be, I didn't write any orchestra pieces. There was only small groups, chamber music, and of all combinations. A lot of experimental stuff, sometimes with electronics, and that was way before, what we have now, and synthesizers. That 1986, that year of 1986 was really a landmark year. That's when, if you were writing music in Hollywood, you had to make a decision like I'm going to get on board with this stuff to some degree, or I'm going to stick with the old, the traditional, pencil on paper approach, So that was, you're asking about the first pieces, right? So there was a place at Columbia University, which is an electronic music studio, and some real well-known avant-garde composers would experiment with sound, and sometimes would combine them with live instruments, and I just thought that was the coolest. So I did a little of that. We all had names for these things, like, TH-104, or, these like pretentious names. But I just loved the idea of experimenting with sound, which leads us to the next question, perhaps.
So you mentioned that you were part of the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble for a few years, came out to LA in the early 70s.
Yes.
And then it sounds like The Rookies was the first
That's
show
right.
that you got.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your brother-in-law. Do you want to name who that was?
Yeah, George Stanford Brown. He was one of the Rookies, and he was married to my wife's sister, Tyne Daly. They're no longer married at the moment, but he, as I said earlier, he was totally responsible for getting that show or being on it. In those days, there were like 3 or 4 composers on an episodic show, because it was too much music for one person to write, because it was all handwritten and all copied, and assembling the musicians. Now, I could live in Timbuktu and do some pretty cool sounding things, and bam, on the internet it goes, and that's it. But in those days, we all took chances. I mean, took chances, we took turns. That's it, yeah.
So how did you learn to score for television?
Because everyone, the producers, or I think felt very sympathetic to me, because I met them and I seemed to be affable and, collaborative. And they said, "Do you ever do this before?" "Well, no, not really, They said, "Well, one of our favorite composers is doing some sessions, the next week. Why don't you go, we'll call him and tell him you're going to show up. Why don't you go speak to him and watch him and ask him questions, So I met this man, and he wasn't too helpful, I have to say. But I did kind of get some basic ideas. And when you're, however old I was, I don't know how old I was, 28 or 30?
Around 1975.
Yeah,
so.
Okay. 46, 30? Yeah, 29 or something like that. Okay. You do whatever it takes, and you have this energy and this ambition. I'm going to do it. I'll stay up all night. I'll kill myself. Whatever it takes, And that's what I did. And I made a ton of talk about the rookie mistakes. Because what we'd go and see the movie on film, the episode, and the music editor would write down all the timings for us and underline the dialogue in red, and you'd have pages of these notes. At so-and-so seconds, this happens, and then at 12.1 seconds, he gets shot, and then at 15 seconds, someone falls down, whatever, So, you're going by what you see and what you remember of what it was visually, but the mistakes I made were, there's action, action, and then it stops, boom, and then there's dialogue. So took me a while to get to the idea of like composing through some of these scenes, because I would sort of stop and start. Well, I wouldn't stop, but it would be da 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 da, and it would sound very fragmented, and so pretty quick on there, I got the idea. You don't do that, So, and I think that's a common mistake, young people do nowadays, and I think through, unless you're like some world-class composer before you, like Leonard Bernstein, who did On the Waterfront. Well, he wasn't, he just wrote a magnificent score for that movie. And, then it was months before I got this next one, and then months before I get the next one, and then less months, and then it started to happen, and interesting thing, when you're the new person, or one of the new people in town, you can kind of coast along just with being the new guy. It sounds crazy, but maybe not. But everyone's looking for something new. Who's the new young guy? Okay, and that went a long way while I was learning the craft. So I was lucky that I could keep writing and learning. And looking back on it, knew that I was, thought of as someone different,
So were you there for the recording sessions with the orchestra?
Oh,
as well?
sure.
Were you conducting?
Yeah.
And was that a new experience for you, or had you done plenty of that before?
That's a good question, because oddly enough, I haven't done that before. And for some reason, I just fell right into it, and felt very comfortable. And I'm standing up conducting. I don't even think you could call it an orchestra. It was like a mini orchestra. You could choose. They would say you've got 35 players. You could have 35 violins, or broken up any way you want. Okay, so. I would rely on the engineers in the booth and the music editor, after a take, how was that? Because you have headphones on, you don't really hear it with the speakers and the whole effect. And so I relied on them, and they said, yeah, that's good, or no, that's not good, it's too slow in this part, or take out the cymbal or whatever, or more bass or something. Okay, so that, that went along for quite a while, at least a good 12 years or something, 10 to 12 years before the horrible synthesizer came to town. Ouch.
And we will talk more about that.
Okay.
The producers that you met with for The Rookies, was that Aaron Spelling and Leonard Goldberg?
They were the producers, but they actually, in terms of the music, back then, the music was, it's not like it is now. It's not that it wasn't as important, but they hired me just sort of on a whim, because my brother-in-law was in the show. And, well, first of all, Leonard and Aaron, they were removed from that. It was the post-production people, There was a man named Shelley Hull, Hull. I have a feeling he's long gone now. But it was, at Spelling Goldberg, they had a music editor that was there, who did all their shows. And he kind of was like the music, I'd say, he was the guy who made the decisions. Like, yes, this is good, no, this is not good, do it again, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really who I was working for, and they trusted him. apparently he was in the Army with Aaron Spelling, so that helped, I guess.
So you wound up actually working on a lot of Spelling Goldberg shows. Was it that same kind of post-production team on
Yes.
a number of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think turning a negative into a positive is when Doug Kramer came along to be partners with Aaron. And, Doug had done Love American Style and then teamed up with Aaron to do Dynasty. And they got Bill Conti to do the theme. And they said, okay, now which guys can we get to do the episodes? Okay, well, there's this Mark Snow and these other guys and this one. Oh, who's Mark Snow? Oh, he did our shows, he's good. All right, so I did first one of these episodes, and Doug Kramer hears it, and he says, which one of these guys did that score? It's Mark Snow. Hate it, that was just terrible. I'm looking for Puccini, I don't want this modern stuff, this is, whatever. So I was out, and I thought, oh man, that's it for me, I'm done, So, but what happened is I started to work at other places, which was this wonderful, the world opened up, So that was a real good example of something minus going positive.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about a couple other of the Spelling Goldberg shows. One TV movie that you did was The Boy in the Plastic Bubble,
Right.
1976.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that score.
I met with, that was one score I met with Aaron Spelling. He called me in, and he didn't ask me, like, what are you planning to do? He said, he's telling me about the story, which I got a glimpse of one of the reasons he was so successful. Because he was smart enough to know he wasn't a composer, and he wasn't a musician, but he knew about story, and he knew about drama, And he started just telling me about this story, and I saw him get so into it. He was almost in tears. I mean, he was so overcome by this story and what we're trying to do. And it wasn't phony. It was absolutely, real honest. And it was impressive, and it was kind of inspiring. So I think it was, if it says there, my first TV movie, I think
Yeah.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had a full day of recording, and I think Randall Kleiser was the director, who went on to do, I'm sure you know his name, right? I saw your reaction like, oh yeah, Anyway, I'm sure he's fine somewhere. But he did some big movies actually after that. But it was, somewhat of a sappy score. It was a little melodramatic and melancholy here and there, but there were some good moments. But the best story about that whole experience was, this was being recorded at Paramount Music, the Paramount scoring stage. And right in front of Paramount Studios, there's this old-time restaurant, which I'm sure is gone now. It was called Nickadel's, and it was all the fellas would go, and it was like Musso and Frank, a real clubby, old-fashioned, type place, and waiters in the little cut-off vests and so forth. Anyway, so, the director and the producer, oh, great, Mark, let's go out, let's have lunch on the break together. I said, great. So I walk over to the place, and I'm feeling a little woozy, like feeling a little overwhelmed by this stuff, okay? So in the middle of lunch somewhere, I said, gee, just excuse me for a moment. I went to the men's room. I passed out. Really, I mean, out. And I got up, soon after that. It must have been less than a minute for sure. And I was all pale and, and completely in a panic. And I put cold water on my face and tried to put whatever hair I had left in place. I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, this is the business I've chosen, right? Which I've said in other interviews, you know, and a lot of composers kind of get, you know, the implication of that. We'll, you know, go through hell and back to do this job. And I came out of there and finished it off. And I went to a doctor and told him, and he said, yeah, you're at the wrong doctor. You need the psychiatrist doctor, not me, you know. And that started years of intense, you know, analysis. And I'm almost 70, and look, how perfect, right?
Worked out.
Yeah.
So another show that you worked on, Starsky and Hutch, you did the season 3 theme song. So there's kind of a different theme song, I think, for each season.
Yeah.
So tell us about yours.
Well, I think the first one was Lalo Schifrin, right? They wanted me to do the music for the episodes, you know, me and 3 or 4 other guys, all right? So they had us come and watch the pilot and Lalo was there. And I remember it was a good experience for me because after it was over, I saw Leonard Goldberg was there, and I don't think Aaron, I'm not sure. But Lalo gets up and he says, before anyone could say anything, oh, Leonard, this was a fabulous show. It was just fantastic. I'm so thrilled that you have my music in it. It's a wonderful, you know, and I could see, you know, Leonard go, oh, well, thank you. He really was. Lalo knew his, you know, what he was doing. So then, for whatever reason, they wanted to change that, and they went to someone named Tom Scott, he did a really cool rhythm type kind of pop piece with sax, and I thought it was great. Someone didn't like that. And then they said, why don't you take a shot? So I thought about Mission Impossible, right? And I remember the rhythm of that was some kind of weird 5/4, bum 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 bum, so forth and so on. So I thought, oh, maybe that's a cool idea with electronics. Or a synthesizer as the lead instrument. So I got someone to orchestrate the orchestral part, who was someone named Ron Raymond, who was the son of someone named Sid Raymond, who orchestrated West Side Story. And that is one of the great orchestration pieces of all time. So we did that, and that lasted a year. And then someone said, well, let's go back to Tom Scott's version. Okay, nothing I could do about it. So that was the story about that.
Was that the first theme song you ever did?
I think so. When was Heart to Heart was later than that,
That was
right?
a little bit later, yeah.
Okay.
So did you score that to the opening sequence? Or for Starsky and Hutch?
Yeah. Yeah.
You scored 2 picture.
Right. You know, in the old days, that would last sometimes as much as a minute and a half, you know. Now, if, you know, you're lucky if there is a main title, number one, and sometimes there are 5-second versions, and the X-Files in 1991, 92?
3, I think, is when it started airing.
Oh, okay, 3. That was like 45 or 30 seconds. So they they want to get more commercials in, so anyway.
So you mentioned Heart to Heart. You were the primary composer and did the theme song for that.
You're right.
Starting in 1979.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the theme for that.
Well, it was a 2-hour pilot, and there was a chase scene at the end of it where where the hero and heroine are riding a convertible, escaping the bad guys, careening around mountain roads, etc. And I did this guitar, kind of old-fashioned, corny guitar, wah-wah guitar thing, whatever it was, and here comes this tune, da-da-da-da, ba-ba-da-ba. And it was an elongated version of this chase action scene. And then one of the producers, which was Tom Mankiewicz, of all people, was just the greatest. I forget who, maybe he directed it too. But they said, hey, there's the theme. That's perfect. You know, just do a short version of it. So that's how that came about. In fact, Tom wanted to hear it on the piano, and unfortunately, like some of the other composers you've interviewed, I'm not that great as a keyboard player. But we were at Fox Studios, and we went to a room where someone said, oh, there's a piano in that room, you can go in there. So we walk into this small room, and I see some music paper on the piano, and I look at it, and it says, title is Dracula, right? John Williams. Well, okay. So I'm looking at, and these were sketches for his score of this. There was a Dracula movie with Frank Langella, and I don't know if it was the great English actor, you know, Laurence Olivier. It might have been. But Tom Mankiewicz was there, and he knew John Williams. So I'm going, da-da-da-da, you know, tapping away, whatever. Oh, good, okay, that's great. And then he says, I'm going to call John Williams. I said, why? He says, I'm going to tell him we got everything we needed, you know, from his score. So, anyway, and that was basically that.
So were you getting to know a lot of the other composers around town at this time? You knew Lalo. Were you meeting other people in the business?
You know, I think a lot of composers don't particularly express themselves well verbally, and some do. Some are remarkable orators. You know, I was kind of shy, and I remember there were these meetings of these composer groups, like the American Society of Composers and Lyricists, blah, blah, blah. And there'd be meetings every once in a while, and everyone would be griping about something. And we've got to get together. We've got to form a union. We can't, you know, take this. You know, we're not going to work on weekends. We're not going to work on, you know. So I would meet these people, and everyone just seemed pissed. I mean, really, just, you know, and in their own kind of world. It wasn't like, now it's, well, anyway, it wasn't like I'd call up Lalo. I said, Lalo, man, I'm having trouble with this cue. Can you help me out with it? You know, not exactly, you know. You had to call someone on your own level. You know, you couldn't be calling John Williams, can you come on down and, and write a love theme for this thing. But actually, you know, I got to the point where I was getting a lot of work, and I needed some help from people. And people would send me demo tapes and stuff, and I'd listen, and I'd have to say, gee, that's not right. And some of these guys would get pissed, and some of them would say, oh, I understand. And then I'd eventually find someone, you know. But I wasn't terribly comfortable with that, because you don't want to give out too much and, you know, control over the project. So, there.
So going back to Heart to Heart,
Yes.
for the actual score,
Yeah.
were you given any specific guidelines?
Actually, somebody wrote a theme song, some well-known songwriter. I don't remember who, but it was a very breezy, old-fashioned, da ba da ba da ba da ba da, something like that. And I thought, it's very nice. It's just not right, for this show. And they said, oh, but that's so and so. You got to use it. So I gave it a try, and they said, God, what's that? And I said, that's the piece. And they said, all right, you're right, forget it. So then the rest of it was just do what you want. But, somebody from the show, one of the producers, writers sometimes, would show up in the scoring stage and they'd make their comments, and too fast, too slow, just right, thank you very much, next.
So the Hearts traveled all over the globe. Did you
Yes.
change the music?
Well, how about
kind of-
this? Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Ladies and gentlemen out there, get ready for a new reboot of Heart to Heart. Gay Heart to Heart.
Huh.
Yeah,
Are you going to
So-
be involved?
not yet. I haven't been asked yet, but everyone's trying to think of, oh well, okay, great, who's going to be in it? And then everyone we're all start thinking of, how about this one and this one? Hey, if they're putting money into it, somebody must know something and think this could be an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No. Just the Hearts kind of traveled all
Yes.
over the place. Did you change the music based on kind of the setting of the episode?
Yeah, sometimes there's a little ethnic something, If they go to, where did they go? Oh, wait. They went to Ireland, they went to, well, they certainly went to France, and they certainly went to England. In fact, there was a big writer's strike for a year or two. And oh no, I take it back. It was a musicians' strike. So we were not allowed to record any music in America. So there were like 3 episodes of Heart to Heart, 1 episode of The Love Boat, and a TV movie that I did at the Abbey Road Studios in London. Now that was fun. And they know how to make stuff sound good there. That was a great experience. All because of a, musicians strike, but they had to record this stuff.
Was it a much different process than in the States?
No, but it was just, the things that were important to them, like, the tea trolley would be rolled by every hour, and this was, everyone just stops dead and, has their tea, and it was just nice. It was just real, you didn't feel quite the kind of ambitious animals coming out of the woodwork like in America. I'm sure it's only because of the accents, but
Did you do
The
any
players were great.
character cues or motifs in Heart to Heart?
well, there was that character Max, and Lionel Stander playing this old curmudgeon butler assistant.
He did the voiceover in the theme song.
That's
theme
right.
as well,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. God, I think he called up one day and said, I did the voiceover there and that music. I should be getting some music royalties, don't you think, you guys? Oh, sure, okay. Anyway, but it was more about the situation. It wasn't necessarily, oh, here's Max's theme. Well, let's use and do variations on that, or Jennifer's theme, or, Mr. Hart. What was his name again?
I don't have it here, actually.
Yes, Jennifer and Jonathan,
Jonathan,
of
I
course,
think, yeah.
Jonathan. Right. So, anyway, but there were ethnic, when they would go to other countries, you'd go to France and have a little concertina, da 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 dee ba da ba da, etc. And then dum bum 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 da ba da ba da, ah da 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 da. So,
Is it a similar structure kind of for each episode?
yes, yeah.
So let's move on to another of your TV movies, 1984, Something About Amelia, which you got an Emmy nomination for.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that score.
That was, I was asked, I was asked to be on the set, right?
Is that unusual?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you're on the set and they said, bring some music in a boombox and let all the actors hear it so they can get in the mood, well, all right. I did that in France, but not on a TV show. But they said, no, just come and, see what, get the feel of the energy and the, because it was a serious topic of the time, certainly. And Glenn Close was in it. And, I asked the director, I said, all right, I don't want to get in the way. And he said, oh, no, stand right over there. So I was just like off camera. And I looked at him like, really? Yes. And Glenn Close is going in and out of the shot. And she, she was the mother, I think, and she was upset. And rightly so, but, being, off camera, she didn't break character, and I was just like this far away from her, and I saw her going back and forth, and seeing this intense anger and fury and sadness, right in front of me, which I later saw, on screen. That was interesting, but I remember writing a theme that was a very high bassoon, which was the instrument Stravinsky used in The Rite of Spring at the beginning of bassoon solo, and I thought, well, that would be good. Now, the Rite of Spring music would not be appropriate for something about Amelia, but the instrument I thought was a good choice. And I think because it was a melodic score, an emotional score, I think that might have been why it got an Emmy nomination, because we'll get to the electronic world in a moment, but I remember the director was Randa Haynes, who went on to do Children of a Lesser God, and then she did one other movie, and she just split and went and lived in Paris in a six-flight walk up, and was never heard from again. But she was really interesting, talking about the music and what she wanted, and not too much, and just very simple, and just give me one note and just hold that there. And so she was real, specific. In fact, it was her and this woman named Deborah Aul, I think it was A-A-L. She was the producer. So I was, those are the two people I had to, answer to. And they would have their kind of internal problems from moment to moment, and I was, observed that. And I mean, there was one moment where one of them said, no, damn it, I love that. That's how I want it. And the other one would say, it's wrong, it's got to be this. And then they said, all right, it's up to you. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, great. Take one from, anyway, so I had to, whatever, it worked out. I didn't win. Bruce Broughton won for the North and the South, I think. That was a big time show at the time.
Is it a much different process composing for a TV movie versus episodic television?
You get a little more time. You get a feeling of, there's something more here. There's something, story development, and it's a little more. It can be a little more detailed and deeper. You have time to develop themes or different strands of music throughout that, where episodic is, just like, let's just do it and do it right and go home.
So let's move on to Falcon Crest. You did 40 episodes of that starting in season 6. Season 6 and 7 around 1986. Tell us a little bit about writing for that show.
Well, for whatever reason, 1986 was the year, child, I remember was the year when the electronic studio, home studio, synthesizer world started. And it was incredibly primitive. And people who were doing it, they'd have rooms with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 keyboards stacked on top of each other with wires crisscrossing, and you have to, between pieces, unhook this one and hook up this one and make sure this is working. It's really primitive and really complicated. And the sound was really, quite sort of unmusical at the time. It was very, it was not warm, but it was a time that, you had to decide, am I going to start in with this or just keep doing what I was doing? And I know a lot of composers said, no, that's bullshit, we're not going on with this, that's not going to last. These are toys, this is not real music, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, but I heard something. There was this one composer, his name was Brad Fiedel, who did a whole slew of TV music on his home studio. And it was very, very simple. And there was something about it. There was something to it. Because he was getting called all the time. And tons of these shows. And I'm listening thinking, what is it? What's going on here? It's just a single line of music. And, so I thought, gee, I like this. I'd like to get into this. This might be going somewhere. So I remember my accountant, of all people, said, look, here's the biggest, most expensive machine there is. You get that. Don't fool around with these little Casio deals or whatever. Go for the big time. Okay, so I did. Took me quite a while to really get a handle on it. But you're talking about Falcon Crest. My wife and I bought a place in Vermont, like in, I don't know, 80, or maybe around 85 or 84. And why it was in Vermont is because this machine I had was invented by these two guys at Dartmouth. And they had a seminar for it one summer. I went to that, and Dartmouth was in Hanover, New Hampshire, and right near Woodstock, Vermont. And someone said, oh, let's go to Woodstock, have a drink. We did. It was a gorgeous day. And I asked, I walked into this bar. I said, I wonder if anyone knows about the real estate here. Before I could finish, a card was put in front of my face. And it was a picture of a trailer park and a Jewish star. And this guy turned out to be the only Jewish real estate person in Vermont. He shows me a house. I buy it. Now, it took me 6 months to buy it. The house was not in great shape. It was New England farmhouse style. But the view was just outrageous. It was 100 acres for less than you could have gotten a shack out in, Simi Valley or someplace, if you know what I mean. So I had a friend who was a producer, and he said, listen, they want me to do Falcon Crest, and they said I could use anyone I want on the music. Do you want to do it? I said, yeah, sure. And he said, well, how are you going to do it? You have your place in Vermont and in Santa Monica. And I said, well, I've got a setup here in Vermont. And he said, well, how are you going to get the music to us? I'll figure it out, blah, blah, blah. So I did the music and recorded it on 4-track tape. Now, 4-track tape is what the Beatles used to do Sgt. Pepper. Now, music for Falcon Crest was not as good as that. I didn't have George Martin standing next to me. But I got these people to come from Los Angeles, this couple, nutty couple, who mixed the music for me. And then we put the tapes in FedEx boxes and out it went. And that went on for a while, you know. I'm not sure it was the right approach. Well, he wanted it, and no one said, "You're fired," so I kept doing it until he was fired, and then they went on to someone else.
So did the synthesizer change your process a lot? Were you still writing scores out?
No, I mean, one of the, this story, I was invited to show up at this, with this group in Burbank. It was real elderly composers, and the Society of Music Arrangers and something like that. It was a group. They were interested in how I all of a sudden was getting a lot of work and what my process was and how I did it and what this electronic business was all about, you know, because they didn't know about that, weren't too keen on it. I go out there and I'm all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I said, well, this is what I do. I have my keyboard. Here's the show. It's on the screen in front of me. And I just start playing along with it, you know? And I improvise, and then I hit on something I like, and then I go over it and over it, you know, over it again. And someone said, well, do you ever write this stuff down? I said, no, I just save it. Said, what do you mean save it? I push a button, and it saves it and it records it. Oh, okay. Anyway, I saw these faces of these guys go, oh, really? And then someone said, you know, those are the guys who have nothing better to do on Saturdays and Sundays than to go and vote for the, you know, the Emmy Awards. So if you don't ever get one, maybe, I'm not saying, but maybe, you know. So, and that leads me back to your question again.
The process, how your process changed with the synthesizer.
Oh, okay. So it really took quite a few years to get to where I felt comfortable with the electronics, trying to make, you know, something that approximated like melodic music, you know, because mostly it was used for sound, ambient sound effect type scores and so forth. But the technology just kept changing so quickly, and it is, you know, right now where everything could be was done faster, and there was much more control, and the music, the spectrum of sound really warmed up, and it started to breathe. You know, if you knew what you were doing after a while, these electronic instruments could really make something approximating music, you know. So, and some of these machines could print music, so you could play something and push a button, you know, and out comes, ooh, that's pretty cute, you know. So that really was so great. Now, what was the question again?
Just your process, you know, just the process, how it changed from pre-synthesizer.
Right, yeah. But, you know, the players and the copyists and the music recording studios, there was this beginning of this incredible panic, you know, and they're thinking, now, wait a minute, we're getting, you know, X'd out of this world now. And also, the musicians union was so rigid about the scale of what musicians would get paid. Right now, what does this have to do with the electronics? Not much, but I was just thinking about the home studio composers were doing the scores at home, and they weren't employing any live players, you know. And that really started to put a real dent in the, you know, in the livelihood of the players and the music copyists and the studios. And it's definitely coming back. Maybe, God, I don't know, 10 years ago. I mean, there are a lot of TV shows now, I don't know about a lot, but that have live music. But now there's usually one composer on a show. But that composer can do it all, you know, do all the episodes. And I think the producers, you know, are very comfortable knowing there's this one person and having a relationship with him or her, and that's really wonderful too. I'm drifting a little bit here.
No, it's fine. So in the 80s, then around 86, did you start to build up your own personal library of cues and sounds?
Well, this one instrument that I had then, and I still do now, in fact, I have a few of them because they don't make them anymore. So, my studio now is in Connecticut, where it used to be literally right up the street here. There were groups of engineers who came up with these music libraries of sounds. Either they were these wonderful, imaginative electronic sounds, or samples of live instruments and sounds, voices, violins, trumpets, everything. And I slowly got, you know, my favorite libraries going, and it would change, you know, year to year and sometimes week to week, because right now I've got just tons of libraries that I could go into and audition different sounds and instruments, which takes a long time, which is a pain in the ass. But so it's always a blank, you know, a blank canvas when you start with a home studio, where anything goes. I mean, and quickly, and it's at your fingertips so instantly. When you're doing a big orchestra score, you have to demo it for the producers and the director on some kind of electronic mock-up for them to approve it before you go in with the big orchestra. And once you're there, then you can make changes, but they're very slight changes where the basic ideas are all set. But when you're in that mock-up stage, or even the scores I do now that are all electronic, I have to show to the producers and directors and have them say it's okay or not and fix it. And it's a very, very quick and expedient process, you know. I think that's such a big difference. You know, you get the show, you start in, a couple of days, it's done. It's not, you start in, you write it out, it goes to the copyist, it gets copied out, that takes days. The musicians are called, they show up, that's another couple of days. Studio, it's done, and then that's mixed, the music is mixed. I mean, because I just mix the stuff myself, and it's out there, and that's what X-Files was all about, and that was all right next door.
All right, let's take a short break, and then we're going to talk about that.
Okay.